Welcome to Bitcoin Aggregated. We took a week off because we had stuff on, or was it 2 weeks off? I think, Chris. Whatever.
It's been a while since drinks,
Been a little while, yeah.
So we've cracked open the drinks.
Yeah. Yeah. Cheers. A lot of content to get through, and we've got a guest today, Brett, who we met through. It's weirdly enough, like you live what 20 minutes from me, which is so bizarre.
Yeah.
Through someone in America that was like, "Oh, you should you should hook up with this guy Brett." So we went for coffee, and had a very similar journey for the last year or so, from education, kind of into specifically into sort of building stuff in the Bitcoin slash I guess crypto space, more so for yourself with stacks and everything. But did you want to give a bit of an intro to yourself and your background, and then we'll go into sort of what you're working on later on?
Yeah, for sure. So as you said, my name's Brett. I had been in education for 10 years. I guess I've been involved in crypto and obviously, kicked off to the journey with Bitcoin late 2016, early 2017. So obviously wish I bought a bit more back then when I hopped in, but that's everyone's story, apart from one of my mates who's done really well. But yeah, so been in education for about 10 years. And then obviously the last couple of years, teaching from home because we had serious lockdowns, as you probably would have remembered, Kieran, in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And so I was spending a fair bit of time online, obviously, because of teaching the kids over the computer, and then obviously being able to sort of explore and keep feeding my crypto. And, obviously I can talk a bit more about it, working for Gamma, which is an NFT marketplace in the Stacks ecosystem. Happy to talk about how Stacks and Bitcoin interrelate after. But yeah, I ended up sort of getting involved in the NFT space. I found parallels between that sort of interesting community side of being an educator, and then that, the crypto side of mixing into the NFT space, and various sort of, I guess, various kind of pathway through there. But I guess it's been really interesting. Similar, I guess, when I caught up with Kieran, it was fascinating to kind of hear about things that we've done and things that we sort of taught the students, and both been sort of interested in, I guess, politically and financially, and, keeping an eye. And we just had a little chat before the podcast began about, an experience that I had in Argentina when I was backpacking back with my now wife that was in 2013, and just how, the interesting things that Bitcoin can do and Bitcoin can fix in terms of like hyperinflation, and how fiat's really, taking a pummeling at the moment. And so it's sort of all been kind of like to use the podcast is called Bitcoin Aggregated. It's been sort of an aggregation or a culmination of a lot of my interests to end up in the place that I am now, and be investing in the space, but then also be invested in the space because I sort of have made the leap and work for an NFT marketplace in Web3.
It's pretty cool. And you were telling me a little story about yourself with the kids at school. So I don't know if you want to talk about it, but like you're
happy to.
Yeah. So like you took it upon yourself to sort of teach them financial literacy using BGC, and do you want to run us through that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So it's really fascinating. The curriculum has its sort of positives and negatives, and I guess one of the pitfalls is kind of like the outcomes that they want the teachers to teach the students when it comes to financial literacy. And I just thought, you know what, I've got the flexibility and the freedom to teach the students what I want because we're teaching from home. Probably would have done it if we're at school anyway, but sort of rather than teaching like the traditional financial literacy curriculum, I switched it over, and we talked about Bitcoin, and we talked about cryptocurrency, and we talked about how obviously they were grade 5-6 students, so at that 11 and 12-year-old level, which is a great time to learn because they're so open to learning at that stage, just about how talking about digital scarcity, talked about the history of money, and how the banks and the governments have really controlled things, and I guess, suppressed what we can do with our money, and causes for like house prices, and them understanding the stock market as well. And obviously then linked it into their sort of traditional maths, but did a lot of comprehension around Bitcoin and mining and why it works, and what decentralization means in their life at their age. And I think it really resonated with them actually, because it's funny, 11 and 12-year-olds, start to want to be their own little people and don't want the man to tell them what to do. And it's sort of like, there are amazing parallels. And I think it's a really great age for them to sort of figure it out. So we did lots of fun things. They sort of picked a few cryptocurrencies and then sort of tracked it and graphed it. And we talked about why some of them did well, why some of them didn't. They did a little background research on the ones that they picked. And it was sort of interesting for them to really kind of explore that. And also, we talked a little bit about NFTs and community and digital scarcity and how that sort of links in as well. So yeah, something I'm passionate about, something that, I've got 2 young kids, my 5 and a bit year old's already starting to understand a little bit about. And yeah, I guess, it really does tie together with the macro environment in which we live. So yeah, it was fascinating stuff and it was fun stuff. And I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think it's so important, and like going back to like my days at Varana, and even last year really, and all the stuff that kids are doing online. It was such a good opportunity, like through the lockdown period, for like different types of education to sort of bleed in and I guess sort of overwrite some of the legacy curriculum. Like like you said, like there's a lot of stuff that you kind of just have to go through just because it's part of the quote unquote curriculum, and there's regulators that go through that, and it's that they're not always the brightest people, right? Like writing the curriculum, like a lot of the stuff you look at like, Jesus, like why are we doing this? And like the rote learning, and it's crazy.
Yep.
So it's so cool to see someone else leading the charge with that. And then it'll be amazing to see, like, I don't know if you still have contact with any other students or anything, but to see where they go with that sort of down the track. And if because you always remember like back
course.
to primary school, and it's so much amazing stuff that a lot of schools that we wouldn't have the opportunity to do. So you kind of did that on your own, and to see where that goes, I think is really important. Anyway, we'll kick on. Let's
course.
Let's go to the news. We've got a lot of stuff that we've kind of posted. Let's have a look here. Screen. Yeah. Is that popping up? Oh, actually, hang on. Stop share. Because we want the audio. Here we go. Is that coming up?
It's just loading now.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a bunch of stuff. This one I just saw today. I don't know if you guys saw this.
I saw that.
Yeah, how cool is that? I was looking at the comments as well. Everyone's like, "Oh, that's amazing!" But Excel. So Microsoft Excel has actually incorporated BTC into their currency, like as one of the main currencies. And one of the comments I saw on there that was really funny. It's like, well, it'll probably be the only one left like pretty soon. Like, that's probably true. But I thought that was so. That's a sign of the times, I reckon. Like for a big company like Microsoft to do that, like that's huge. I
Yeah, it's
reckon.
not subtle, is it?
No, it's not subtle at all. I think it'd be cool if they integrated Sats as well. I reckon that's the next one, right? Like having.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Does it automatically kind of do it to 100 million Satoshis, or is it just like the symbol? It's like lip service.
From one of the quotes, apparently they've got the decimal place wrong. So, so I don't know, but look, it's a step in the right direction. I think it's pretty cool. There was this thing as well that I saw today, and I was like, holy shit, this guy's built a backpack. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, that was at the mining conference that happened about a month or so ago in America.
You saw this before, yeah. I was like, that is sick. I mean, it's a gimmick, but it looks like something out of like, I don't know, Ghostbusters or something.
I'm still confused as to how they have enough power to like actually power that thing.
Yeah,
like, that must be it on the bottom, that square in the bottom. Whatever
that's a
hell
UPS.
that is.
So he's rocking a UPS on the bottom, powering that. So he must be charging that, like as he goes. So it's obviously just mining as he's like walking around, and then he has to charge it up like from time to time. But still,
I can't imagine it would have a really long run time. But yeah, it's a cool gimmick for a mining conference.
That's an art project. Now that's an art project.
An art project.
Very Very,
Move,
very
move over, Van Gogh.
yeah, exactly. All right, so the other one I wanted to talk about was this one here. So I don't know if you remember, Chris, like years ago, there was a guy at the Bitcoin Center and the Blockchain Center who came through, and he was adamant that he was gonna like
I think
use,
I know who you're talking about.
I forget his name, but he was
I don't
like,
know. Yeah, I don't know his name either, but he was doing something with like text messaging and Bitcoin or something, right?
yeah, in Africa specifically. I was just like,
Yeah, I remember the guy, but I don't remember much about it.
yeah, oh, I had a long chat with him, I remember, and he was adamant that he was going to integrate Bitcoin transactions into like old Nokias and like old phones because that's what people mostly use in
Yeah,
Africa. And I was like, I didn't get it. I don't really understand how he was doing it. And I
neither
thought it
did
was
I.
kind of like crazy a little bit, but it looks
Yeah,
like
it
it's
is.
legit, right? I was like, what? I popped across it. I was like, wow. So someone's like, either it's him or someone's had the same idea and like implemented it somehow. But I thought that was pretty amazing. And if you think about like what really grabbed me when he was talking about that, like he did a prez. I was like, oh, that's amazing because like yeah, these countries that kind of have to leapfrog over the tech, well, like El Salvador's done since, I suppose, with cheap Android phones. But at the time, like you couldn't get a smartphone for cheap, so it seemed like the logical sort of way to go. And the fact that's still a project, I thought that was pretty amazing. And I think it's like it's a testament to what we can do with sort of legacy tech to integrate into the Bitcoin blockchain specifically, and yeah, leapfrog for these people that probably don't have access to well, internet, I suppose, and if they do, it's few and far between. But
Do you actually
I
know
don't
how
think,
it works?
no, I don't. That's what I was wondering if you guys would have seen.
Nah, I had no idea.
Damn, yeah, it's
But
yeah,
your point there actually, I think, ties in nicely to another tweet that you've reposted here on the website, which is the video or the interview of Jack Mallers talking with a reporter from, yeah, that one there. We won't watch it because it's like a 10-minute thing, but I watched it just before and it kind of touches on that, basically talking about how like we need to get everybody onto the same rail network, being
yeah.
Bitcoin. And in this case, with the legacy system of text messaging and cellular data
Mm.
onto the rail of Bitcoin. And I guess this particular interview is talking about how, as you can see, Twitter partners with Strike on Bitcoin tipping, which I think was announced quite a while ago. Not really sure
Like
why.
ages ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why this has popped up again as news. I don't know. Maybe they've actually delivered it or something. I'm not too sure. But basically, it's a pretty good video. Anytime Jack talks is usually a pretty good thing to
Yeah.
listen to. But yeah, he's talking about how like with Strike, you know, you don't even need to accept Bitcoin. You could accept Japanese yen or something on the other end, but you're using Bitcoin rails to get that transfer across those borders instead of relying on regular intermediaries like Western Union and regular banks and all the other third parties that touch each of those transactions along
And
the
take
way.
some out of it as well.
Which is why we have high
Yeah.
fees. And so he's talking about how Lightning has now become the replacement to that, to basically do it all but instantly and also pretty much fee free. And so slowly we're going to, and he uses, and, I've used this analogy before, I'm sure many of us have, of how the internet is kind of like that. The internet is the rail for information, and everyone has plugged into that rail to provide us with email and websites and all the different types of services and different technologies that exist on that. And so he's saying, that time will come with Bitcoin, where Bitcoin is like the internet and everyone taps into it with their own specific services and products. And yeah, I think it's a good analogy. It's a video worth watching if you haven't sort of seen Jack talk about that before.
It is, and she comes at it from, it's really interesting. There was one key point where she's saying, is this like I think it was a bit of an aha moment. She's like, is this what Facebook were trying to do with whatever the hell their thing? What was their crypto called that they were trying to spin up?
Like Meta, they've changed the brand like 5 times.
Libra? It was like Libra.
Libra.
Yeah, Libra, yeah.
Yeah, Libra, like the women's sanitary product.
Yeah. she was like, "Oh, is it like that?" And Jack is like, "Well, kind of, yeah, fine, but no." It was pretty good, but like,
But you do need analogies for people though. Like if they can understand it in their way, it's fine.
100%.
I think that sometimes can be the problem is that we want to like make it overly technical, and for like the masses, if that's the analogy, and that works, then that's good.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of analogies when I try to explain stuff to people.
Yeah.
Like I got a lot of background in like hardware wallets and security. So when I tell people like public addresses and private keys, they just roll their eyes at me. But if I say to them, well, a public address is kind of like a BSB and account number, for those that are Australian, they'd understand.
Yeah.
And your internet login password or your PIN number to your credit card is kind of like your private key. It's the thing that allows you to spend. And so using analogies like that, I agree, is definitely easier for people to comprehend. It's just like the internet. No one's talking about TCP/IP and all the different protocol levels. It just works. You just go to the website, you www. And it reroutes it from to the IP address. That like no one's questioning any of this technology because it's just so common practice. And like Bitcoin, I guess, is just not there yet. And we all know that it's probably going to get there, but it's just going to take time, and it's going to take us nerds to get it to that point.
I'd kind of argue it's getting there quicker.
It is getting there. It is getting there. It certainly is getting there. There's no denying that.
I think particularly with Lightning, I think Lightning, like the UX on Lightning is beautiful, like for the most part. And I find it easier to onboard people with Lightning than it was with like, Bitcoin QT or even custodial stuff. So like even like CoinJar back in the day, which was cool to begin with, but it's kind of like, not your keys, not your coin. Speaking of which, had two people this week. There's my cold card, by the way. Just came through, just a calculator. Yeah, really cool hardware. Yeah, speaking of which, I had two people this week. So there's one through my partner. Had like at her work had someone who asked about, I forget what the company was, some UK company. Basically custodial service just locked them out. So they like put a whole bunch of fiat in to buy Bitcoin, and it's been months since they've been allowed to access it. So I want to find out what it is, but I'm like, oh, that sounds like it could be like a Celsius knockoff, or maybe even it's just a service where they're trying to buy BTC. And
they're going down on a weekly basis, so it could honestly
man.
be any of them, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, not that we do need to remind people because they don't seem to listen, but it's been said many times before. Just take control of your bloody keys.
That's right.
Stop freaking gambling and giving your ownership off to other people.
Well, they don't even understand it from the sounds of it. So that was the second time this week. So this morning was the other one. So there was some pyramid scheme from the sounds of it. That's the only way I can describe it. Sounded like BitConnect sort of style, where this
guaranteed percentage of returns or something.
Well, this bloke was saying, yeah, you buy a fraction of a Bitcoin. I'm like, well, you can do that anyway.
Yeah.
With other people. And the more people you get into it, and then it was a house of cards. Like people just ran off it. I'm like, yeah, obviously, it's like not your keys, not your coin. But what I find frustrating, and this is where the education piece comes in, and so important, is to them, like they'll walk away and go, Bitcoin is a scam, and they won't look at it again. They'll just be like, nah, that's a scam. I got scammed. Like it's over. So I think, like, I mean, I have empathy for them, because it's like, it's probably a lot of money to them or whatever. But at the same time, it's frustrating because like you said, Chris, we've been saying it for fucking years. Not your keys, not your coin. Like, get it off the bloody exchange. But I don't know, like, what's the answer? It's crazy.
I think the problem here is, and I agree with you guys, obviously, is that on the whole, like, what is it, like it's only two? Is it? I think I heard Checkmate the other day. I don't know if you followed that whole Corey Clipstein thing when he called Stacks an affinity scam, and then there was a huge blow up on Twitter, and then a lot of I wouldn't say so there's like this whole Bitcoin maxi sort of thing and whatever, and I wouldn't say I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, but I'm Bitcoin first or Bitcoin leaning or whatever you want to call it. But and so Checkmate, who is lead Bitcoin analyst for Glassnode, I think he said there's some stat like only, is it 2% of the world have crypto, or 2% of the world have a decentralized wallet? I can't remember. There was some stat like that. So I'm not surprised if even if it's 5 or 10%, but let's just say it's in that realm. If 90% of the world aren't plus and not used to having their keys and protecting their keys, that's one of our biggest hurdles, I think. And I think that people are so used to somebody else looking after their thing, like, I forgot my password, reset your password, get back in, like that. So taking ownership over that, I get it. Like it's a tricky thing. It's a hard thing to get your head around. And when I'm onboarding people, I think that's one of the biggest hurdles is like, well, once you do this, the rest is easy, but you do actually need to take that responsibility. And I think that part of it, I think is like, that, as you just said, I definitely empathize with them because, when let's call ourselves crypto natives. When you're not crypto native, it is scary, like they're like, what do you mean? You got to keep 24 words, and it's a bit of a mind boggle for them. So I hate that it happens and it's killer. And we know what the answer is, but at the same time, it's
imparting that.
Yeah. It's almost as if we've come full circle as like humans, right? So if you go back far enough, we were self-reliant.
You looked after
you looked after yourself, you looked after your family, you grew your own food, you made sure that things got done. Whereas these days, because the world has progressed so much, and there's certainly plenty of positives to come out of that. The fact that we're doing this interview over the internet is just one of those examples, but we've kind of come, I guess, complacent and a little bit, I guess we're taking it for granted, the fact that all of this stuff is, it's just as if someone else will handle that. There's a lack of responsibility and ownership on individuals' lives these days, just because everything is so at your fingertips, so to speak. So it's almost as if we're trying to now unwind all of that and say, well, okay, maybe 200 years ago, there were some elements of that we want to kind of regain, and Bitcoin kind of pokes at that. It says you've got to be self-sovereign. Don't hand over your keys to a middleman or a third party. Take ownership of your assets and all that sort of stuff. Run your own node. Don't trust, verify, all that sort of stuff. I mean, I get that right. Don't trust, verify. Almost thought I said that the wrong way. I was like, oh, embarrassing. But it's just it's funny how like we're on this weird merry-go-round in some sense.
It is, and it's interesting. I think you hit a key point with that. Like, it's kind of moving towards the self-sovereignty, and having your own node is massive. And I think controlling your own keys and everything, and the mining aspect, and having an understanding of that. I think but it all comes back to EDU. I think like it has to come back to education for that. And I'm doing my a course now, like to run through doing my TAE, like for higher ed, so I can basically write an accredited Bitcoin course, or even try to. I was saying to Chris just before we jumped off, I'm basically retrofitting like this blockchain course and kind of renaming everything Bitcoin for it, seeing how it goes. But you have prerequisites, and the prerequisites for a lot of these courses, it's obviously like, literacy, numeracy, making sure you're not LLN, and having digital literacy is a new huge one, right? So it's across the board. You have to be digitally literate. I think financial literacy is going to be the next piece to that. So like for this unit of competency that I'm writing, my prereq is Bitcoin white paper at the top, understand this, explain it back to me, then you can be sort of part of the course. And I think if we can take that attitude, so it's like, maybe that's a bit extreme, but like who I'm writing for in the description is like people who are sort of already financially literate and digitally literate to a degree. So they should be able to do that. But I think if we can take that idea of it, making it like front and center, this is a prereq in order to be able to go on to sort of other things, then that's kind of the way forward. But
you might not have anyone joining your course, Kieran. I fear no one's financially literate. Like they got no idea. No one teaches us this stuff, you know?
No, well, that's the point, right? So like, so making it a prereq means that it has to be included into everything because it's as important as digital literacy. And digital literacy is now, and that's a new thing. So like, we've had a pretty big attrition rate for the course I'm doing. I'd say probably 50%, maybe 40%. And it's all down to digital literacy. So like people who are not digitally literate and they didn't realize you sort of had to be, they're like, I don't know how to pursue this. Like, but
That'll be
that's
less of a problem as time goes on,
That's
though,
what I
just
was
for the
about to
way
say.
kids is like picking up iPads at like
for
2.
sure.
And
My
Yeah.
daughter,
like,
it's a shocker. Like my daughter's 2, my son's 5 and a bit. My daughter was like, I was like, I'm gonna pretend she was like flicking through photos like she's 2. I was like, we don't let it like give her like a bunch of iPad time or anything, but because my son does this program called Reading Eggs, which is like it's really good. He started adding up and doing, his maths is impressive for a 5-year-old not at school yet. Anyway, so she watches him, and so as you said, like I was actually going to touch on that. So when I did work through some of this stuff with kids at school, and sort of like applied it to their lives, they a lot of them play a game called Roblox.
Yeah.
And you Kieran, you probably told this story. I don't know if you've talked about like how you did it through Minecraft, but a lot of them like are building things, trading Robux in Roblox. And I was like, you got to think about it like what you create, or if you create a game or whatever you code up. A lot of the kids in my class were doing like coding things. Some of them already learning Python. I'm like, whatever you code up, you can then own, and you can then like monetize. Not that you're doing everything because we want to monetize things. We don't want to come across like capitalists, but like, but you will own what you do, like when you trade things like the assets and the skins and stuff that you play with in Fortnite or whatever, like you put all this money into the game and someone just takes it to the bank, whereas like you'll then own your assets. And I think that's when it was really interesting to sort of talk to them about Bitcoin and, how it about scarcity and hyperinflation, but then also about them sort of making money from their assets, or digital assets, because they're so digitally literate. It really resonated with them. And so I think Chris is right that like, it will be fascinating. Maybe not right now, but maybe it is in 10 years or 50. God, that's a long time in crypto, but and in the world. But it will be really fascinating to see where it's at, where this generation of sort of, I don't know, 6 to 15-year-olds who are really digitally literate, like more digitally literate than we are, really. Like maybe not us, but the average adult, they
Bitcoin
are.
natives, yeah.
They would. I like. Well, it's actually exciting. I prefer to look at it from a utopian perspective rather than a dystopian perspective. That a lot of people are like, oh, kids are on screens too much, and I do agree that there needs to be a balance, and kids are going to still go outside and run around and be kids. But if anything, like these skills could be put to seriously good use. At least I hope so. It's interesting.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that the looking at devices as like a lot of teachers see it as like a distraction tool, but it's a learning tool. And it's like we were in this was 2 publications. I think it was just like Channel 9 came out to the school, and there was something else we were on, some SBS program. And it was when the state was I don't know if you remember when the Department of Ed decided to ban phones in schools specifically.
I remember.
Yeah, so like there was like some school that banned them, and this principal, she looked like the devil.
don't they all?
That's
They all,
part of
yeah.
the job.
No, there's some awesome ones like my principal from my school was cool.
Yeah, exactly.
But basically, we were using them as learning tools specifically, because one, you can get like 10 Android phones much cheaper than you can a laptop, right? But 2, you can do stuff with those phones that you can't do sitting at a laptop or a computer. So what I loved was the fact that the kids at school, I had a group of girls like in my Coder Dojo, and they were just so articulate. They just like went, we can do this, and this with these phones, like augmented reality and all these cool things that you can do with the device that you can't do with something else. So it really irked me that they like went on that tirade of like blocking or you know, stopping the use of devices that
That's
are really
classic, something new that the legacy system wants to push back against. Like, I think of it, you guys have obviously more recent experience than I do with the education and schooling system, because I don't work in that area and I haven't been in school for 10 years. But I think back on when I was in school and I was like, I don't really remember utilizing smartphones as like an educational tool. Whereas like these days, I mean, every kid and every person has a smartphone essentially. I'm just trying to think, like, what's it like in the classroom now, say in high school, where I'd say the majority of them have iPhones or something equivalent. Like, you could just literally Google anything you wanted, like any answer that is already known to humanity essentially lives on the internet. And I'm just, I have this thought, like, I don't know, once a quarter, where I just like wig out and I'm like, what's it like in school these days compared to what it was when I was a kid? And then you go back, you know, one generation to my parents, and it was obviously completely different again. You know, I still remember having like those old school projectors with the light and the thin film. Like those, you just wouldn't, that just don't exist, I imagine, in schools these days. It's sort of all video projectors with HD and all that sort of stuff. It's just funny how, you know, and that's only one sort of schooling generation, really. Like, I'm only out of school for 10, 12 years or whatever. You know, or maybe a little longer, 14 years. But what, you know, what's it going to be like in another 10 or 15 years?
Oh yeah. Yeah, exactly right.
So all these kids are going to be so primed with Roblox and the digital literacy and everything that they're doing these days. They're going to be so primed and ready for a Bitcoin standard world. It's just going to be the old folks, like it always is, you know, like that's why we still have post offices, so they can go pay their bills in person. Everyone pays their bills online, but it's just like the old school people go down with cash and they don't know how to use the internet. And like,
I run our body corporate. I live in a block of units, and it's fine. And I set up when I took it over. So it was like, you know, rest in peace, that we had a neighbor and he was quite old and he used to run it. He kept the whole body corporate kitty, which, to be honest, actually, it's kind of a bit Bitcoin of him. He kept it in a box under his bed, so at least he wasn't handing it over to the bank. But like you know, like, so like when we pay our body corporate fees and stuff, like they all give me cash or a check. Whereas it's, you know, I've just got to then, you know, pay it online. But, you know, in some ways it's kind of cool, because it is kind of like he was taking custody over his own money. But the other way of thinking of it is, it's kind of like what you just said then kind of reminded me of it. It's kind of like old school, and where does it fit, and how can like we make both of those things kind of work together? And obviously, you know, it's a bit of a cliche, but Bitcoin does fix that. But, you know, like, it's a fascinating, like you said, we kind of are circling back.
Big time.
Yeah.
There's one other, sorry, Kieran, I don't know if you were about to switch it up, but I was about to as well. I don't know if it's on here, but I think it's probably worth talking about. It's not directly price related, which is good, because I'm not interested in that. But the news that came out of Canada over the last sort of week or two with their decision and their legislation, I only sort of looked at it very cursory, but I've got a general idea of what they decided. But essentially,
I don't know if I posted that. I haven't even heard. What's the story?
Oh, well, this might be news to you then. So basically, Canada, I don't know if this is actually in legislation or it's just been proposed. Maybe Brett knows a bit more of the finer details, but essentially they've said they've sort of whitelisted 4 cryptocurrencies, being Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and Bitcoin Cash, where Canadians can buy as much of that as they want. And then essentially any other cryptocurrency will have a limit of $30,000 per financial year. Is that right, Brett? If I got
that's
right?
spot on. Yeah, that's all I read, so I didn't go much deeper than that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I don't know why they've chosen those particular 4. I guess there's some sort of historical thing with them.
Something.
But, so.
Yeah, but, you know, interesting news to come out of Canada, and, you know, Canada has kind of gone on a weird tangent over the last sort of couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
Similar to here in Australia. So, I mean, I wouldn't put something like that past our government here in Australia, limiting the amount of you can purchase of these cryptocurrencies. But then again, if they're making capital gains tax off it, then they probably want people doing as much as they can as well, because it's an income stream. So who knows how Australia will take on it. But yeah, very interesting.
What's the thinking behind that, do you reckon?
I don't know. I haven't looked too much deep into it other than just the fact that they announced it. I don't.
Are they trying to protect people, for lack of a better? I don't even know what that necessarily might mean, but
Yeah, like we know there's lots of scams, so don't buy the scams much.
Yeah.
Could
though,
be-
like, Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash, interesting.
Yeah,
In the group
Bika.
of 4.
Jesus Christ. Of all things, that's amazing.
I was
God,
listening to a Bitcoiner the other day, like a fairly big Bitcoiner, talk about how he still has a soft spot for Bitcoin Cash, and that some people think that it might be like, I didn't, subscribe to it obviously, but that it might be like the original Bitcoin, and that's, like it supposedly, I don't even know a lot about it. You guys can correct me. That is purely like P2P something or other. I don't know. I don't know a lot about Bitcoin Cash, but I know it's been around for a while. But there are all those those Bitcoin forks back in the day, like Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision, which was that kind of crazy Craig Ryland and
yeah.
Well, that
Um,
fork from Bitcoin Cash.
yeah,
So, yeah, but there's so many different Bitcoin forks.
Yeah.
That was almost like if you're either doing an ICO or you're forking a Bitcoin.
Yeah, back in that era,
What
was that, like
2017, 2018.
Yeah.
It was
But yeah, I
incredible.
thought that was interesting news, and perhaps that sets a precedence for some of the West.
Perhaps it's a
when it-
positive.
Yeah. Could
You
be a
might need
positive.
to explain yourself there.
Well, perhaps it's a positive thing that at least they're saying
Big
you can
big-
buy
big-
as much
Bitcoin is
Bitcoin as you
new.
want.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Maybe
That is true.
I'm being generous.
Maybe you're right. Maybe
No,
it is
it
good
might-
that we limit shitcoin purchasing because
It might be. So you look at, like, those people that are getting scammed on whatever the hell things that we're doing this morning and yesterday. Those people still think like Shiba Inu is the same as Bitcoin, right? So maybe, to your point, Brett, it's a
Yeah.
positive, like, for those people to quote unquote protect them, I suppose. But that being said, like, is it really the place of the government to
No.
do that? No, it's kind of
That's
like,
it. It's authoritarian, isn't it?
yeah.
I'd like less government, not more.
Yeah.
Even if I necessarily sort of agree-ish with some of their legislation in this
Ish
sense,
is
like-
correct. Yeah.
Yeah, ish, very big ish. But people should be free to make their own decisions, even if the decisions that they make are absolutely horrible, like
Yeah.
buying Shiba Inu.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting news, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like that come to Australia, perhaps maybe after they've integrated some sort of central bank digital currency, and then they've kind of got a bit more control over it again, and they start saying, okay, now we're limiting all these other things that give people more freedoms to sort of force the hand of, I don't know, just being hypothetical here. Who knows which way it'll go? I certainly don't. But yeah, interesting news for sure. I guess on that side point as well, you might have heard that they have started trialing a central bank digital currency here in Australia. I know they've been talking about it for a while, but over the last week or so, they actually announced that they're doing like a closed trial with some people. I don't know exactly who these, whether it's entities or government sort of bodies trialing it, but they're giving out whatever they're calling this thing. For argument's sake, let's just call it Australia coin. But they're giving it to these participants in this closed trial, like a 1-to-1. So if you give them $1 Australian, you'll get 1 Australian coin, and they're doing a test to essentially see what it's like transitioning to a central bank digital currency. And then obviously once the closed trial ends, you can redeem your dollar back from your Australia coin. That was my understanding of what I read from it. So yeah, it's, they're moving in that direction here in Australia as well.
Wow, that's crazy. So are we the first country to actually do that?
I don't have my finger on the pulse close
I
enough.
don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
I'd
say we're probably one of the first handful of ones that are actually trialing it and doing stuff like
But
that.
Is it not just Australian dollars? It would be like private blockchain, wouldn't it? Like it's controlled by the government.
Yeah,
I don't see the difference.
I literally see no difference between what we have now, which is a largely virtual digital currency as it is. I think it's just maybe they're falling trapped to the whole slap a blockchain on it, and everyone will think that it's somehow better. You know, maybe
Well,
they'll put some marketing spin and say, well, a central bank digital currency has more efficiency and less inflation and whatever bullshit
Whatever
nonsense they come up with.
But they could
you
just
know.
pump more CBDC into it.
Of course they could. Of course they
Yeah.
could. But, you know,
Yeah.
back to the point we made earlier where we haven't been taught financial literacy. Who's going to know? Who's going to
Yeah.
know any different, right?
Yeah.
People are going to think, oh, here's this new shiny coin. It's digital. It's the future. And look at Australia being innovative. But yeah, it's probably the same.
That's my
shit.
guess.
Yeah.
Well,
I think-
it's a nightmare in the long run, right? So like my big fear with that is well, obviously the
Social credit system.
social credit system, tracking and tracing and all that, but the programming in an expiry date for your coin, right? So like the big thing that they've been researching is, all right, so you got this say Aussie coin or China coin, whatever you want to call it, with an expiry date of say 6 months. So if you don't spend it within that time, you can't save it. Like that's it, it's gone. So
I haven't heard of them doing that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did do something like that.
wouldn't be surprised at all. And
Yeah. I mean, that's just one sidestep from telling you what you can and can't buy,
Yep.
you know, which is what they already do with some government services where people get financial help. They, you know, you can't buy this on cigarettes, you can't spend it on alcohol and all that sort of stuff.
yeah,
A central bank digital currency just gives them more power to enforce things like that in the future. No, you can't go down to the alcohol store. You've already spent $100 this month. That's your budget for buying alcohol.
yeah,
Maybe that's we can argue whether that's actually a good thing or not, because alcohol is perhaps not the greatest thing to be consuming in copious amounts, even though I just finished my glass of wine. But again, like, I don't care what people put in their bodies. People should be free to put whatever the hell they want in their bodies. It's not the government's decision to tell us what we can and can't do with our money. But a central bank digital currency certainly gives them more authority to be sort of the arbitrators of what you can and can't buy.
yeah. Did
It's
you guys
it's a scary outlook.
It is. Did you get on the same similar sort of topic? Did you guys see this one? The guy
I heard about it.
Yeah,
He took a bank hostage because he couldn't get his money or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
This is in.
Yeah, I almost looked at it. I was like, most people would see this and go, "Wow, that guy's crazy." When I saw this, I was like, you know, I can kind of understand. Like, I probably wouldn't do it, but like, I can get him being frustrated in the fact that he couldn't get access to his money, which is supposed to be his. But
Yeah.
again,
Well, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was like
Bitcoin
back.
fixes this.
Well, yeah. What year was it that when it was like really? Well, it's still. Again, I don't want to speak for people in Greece. Where was this? This was in Lebanon, but when they had like the major financial crisis and that basically
Greece,
like
the bail-ins.
what year was that? Were they limited you to like, was it $200 a week or $200 a month or something ridiculous? And they basically
2009.
It's been the last 10 or so years.
yeah, and you know, like, that's a classic case. Like, if you can't access your money, someone else controls your money, tells the bank you can't take your money out. It's I can come. Yeah, again, I probably wouldn't hold up a bank, but I can understand maybe. Well, who knows though? Like, we don't, like, if you lived in a country like that, that has those, that's different to here. You know, I think I was going to touch on it earlier. I think when we were saying how people are so reliant on third parties to monitor, you know, to hold their passwords and hold their data, but I guess there are still a lot of countries where perhaps it is actually almost easier for them to be onboarded to things like Bitcoin and not, you know, and to hold their own, you know, keys and hold their own coins. And, you know, like my brother's wife's family of Vietnamese, and their family in Vietnam still keep a lot of their money under their bed because they don't want it in the bank because they think that the country could, you know, withhold them from accessing their own money. So it's almost like they're more prepared for Bitcoin than, say, like first world countries are, which I find kind of fascinating to think about.
Yeah.
Less brainwashing.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's a lot easier to remember 12 or 24 words than it is to, you know, run around with a gun inside of a bank. Like, it makes a lot of sense. Right? But
I mean, Lebanon's had an especially bad time lately. Like, their inflation rates are at like 200+%. Like, they're having
their Zimbabwe moment, really.
Yeah, they're really copying it. So, you know, I can kind of sympathize with folks like this when their world is literally collapsing around them, and then the one thing that they thought that they could get, which was their money, they can't as well. So
Yeah.
I certainly don't condone gun violence or anything like that.
No,
but
we're not saying that.
No,
this is, I guess, why America has their First Amendment or third, whichever the important one for them.
Second Amendment.
Second Amendment. Okay, cool. I was in between. Because governments go tyrannical, and perhaps the only way to protect yourself against that is to be armed. And again, we don't have that kind of culture here in Australia, so it's a little different. But I think this is one of those classic cases where the Second Amendment would probably be helpful when you can't get your money and you can't buy food and you can't live. The government's going crazy. The banks are going crazy. What other choice do you have? I'm not really sure.
Exactly. I wanted to talk about this one finally, and there's probably a bunch of other ones we could have touched on, but just in the interest of time, I know I spoke to you about this, Brett, briefly.
Yeah, we talked about it. Yeah.
But so I can bring it up. Basically, this this thread here, worth going through when you get some time. But basically, what these guys did in Africa is actually using Wallet of Satoshi, so like Australian software, which I love to see.
Yeah, nice.
Which is really, really cool. But basically, they gave these kids access to Satoshis. So they had per week, we'll give you X amount, circular economy. So akin to like El Salvador, how that kind of kicked off. And they, instead of them sort of saying you have to buy this, you have to buy that, and really sort of stepping in, they said, no, let's just give them the money and kind of see what happens. So it started off, as you would imagine, with some 10, 11-year-olds as them purchasing lollies and ice cream and stuff that's bad for you, and as they would normally do, progressed on, and they were like, oh, should we intervene and tell them like what they should buy? Within a couple of weeks, they started buying like healthy food, and they're like, "Oh, okay, this is really interesting. What the hell?" Let them keep going. Like this is amazing. So they sort of taught each other, "No, should probably have some more healthy food." Progress further. The kids on their own, this is the coolest part, decided, "Oh, what if we start buying in bulk? So if we pool all our BTC together, put it in, buy in bulk, then we can save more Satoshis." And they did that on their own. So there's no one telling them how to do that. They just learned that by themselves. Thought that was so freaking cool. And the fact it happened so quickly, and the fact it's in, obviously, like we were saying, like in a third world country, they're kind of prime for it, I suppose. But the fact that these kids like, oh, we can save more. How many kids here have that mentality? How much can we save? Like, many. They all just want to spend. It's a fiat mindset. This flies in the face of that completely, but I just thought it was amazing.
Yeah, I did see this, and I thought the same thing. I couldn't believe how awesome it was. And we briefly talked about the Bitcoin Akasi stuff, I think, in the last podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned Bitrefill has been doing some stuff with them and helping them out and getting involved with the community there as well. But what was the point I was about to make? Oh, geez, it just eluded me.
Wine.
Sometimes I talk too much and I forget the things that I'm thinking about. Oh, geez, that's shocking. It may come back to me later, but that's okay.
No stress. But I thought it was amazing, and to see that happening, I guess it's really akin to what you were trying to do, Brett, and what I was doing at Verana. Teaching young students like how this tech works, but it's just there. They have circular economy to use it, so we don't have to use analogies in Roblox and Minecraft. It's like real world, and it happen like that. Like, it's so cool.
I think I've remembered my point now as well.
I'll go ahead.
But I think this is one thing Bitcoiners sort of often overlook, is the angle of how Bitcoin is savings technology. And I know a lot of people have talked about that, but I think many of us in the Bitcoin space, perhaps maybe we're not in the type of situation like these kids are, where savings is vitally important. But this is a perfect example of how Bitcoin is savings technology. And funnily enough, my brother, who was very anti-Bitcoin for many, many years, for almost 10 years since I first learned about Bitcoin and told him, he became a Bitcoiner over the last sort of 12 months. And he's just like completely orange pilled himself and understands how Bitcoin is savings technology and all that sort of stuff. You know,
Right.
I'm doing it myself with dollar cost averaging on a daily basis, you know, and I often wonder like why my bank account's not holding so well, mostly because I don't like fiat. So I don't try to keep on to much of it. But then I look at my dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin. And I think, here's my savings technology. And this is something I remember when I grew up, like my dad tried to instill that kind of thought into me, you know, make sure you save. I think we all kind of had that kind of upbringing where your parents want you to save, and probably so they don't have to look after you for as long. And you're not dependent on them. But, you know, I think kids these days perhaps have lost that touch. Like everyone's very fast money, fast economy, buy this, use it, get rid of it, don't use it again. Like it's just, you know, we're in that kind of society where everything's very fast paced. And
But it's obviously subconscious, right? So we obviously had that, and I was the same. Like you know, the Dolomite program. Speaking of which, I still have that SatoshiMite.com.
we're doing that. We're doing that one day.
You should do it because the Dolomites, they got banned because they realized kind of that, that, you know, let's not talk about which bank we're talking about, but that was a little back to I was kidding. You know, they used to say which bank.
Which
anyway,
bank?
I was being a bit silly. They realized it was kind of like wasn't really even giving financial literacy. It was just like a big marketing program. So they actually got canned.
It was a fantastic marketing program. I've been with that bank smart. Since then.
They got in.
I haven't changed banks. It's crazy. They got me.
Crazy.
They got you hook, line, and sinker. But Satoshi Mite or something like that. That mate. Okay, I love that.
I reckon it's cool. Yeah. Well, I got the domain, so we should do something with it. But I was going to say it's obviously subconscious, right? So like we've grown up in a fiat mindset where it is spend, because you know it's not going to be worth the same the next day. Whereas,
well, I don't know if people know that.
Nah,
necessarily.
People don't.
Right? Yeah, for sure. Because you look at like, you know, a can of Coke. You know, a year or two later, hey, why is this more expensive?
True. Yeah.
You take that in, but whether you
maybe don't question it any further, but you get that information. Yeah.
I think the interesting addition to that is that people say, you know, I talk to people about it. You've probably heard the same thing. They're like, oh, but crypto's so volatile. Look how much it dips, and you know, it's worth X, and then it's worth, you know, 4 times less. And then I'm like, but you're paying 3 times more for your cup of coffee these days. I'm like, it's the same thing. So it's, you know, I'm not comparing crypto and a cup of coffee. I mean, like when they think that crypto is so dangerous, I'm like, but you're not saying that you're living the same thing, and that, you know, Bitcoin has this like exponential sort of like amazing sort of what's what I'm looking for, kind of like savings, but to save, but also like potential, sorry, is what I'm looking for. You know, they I guess that, you know, it takes a little bit of explaining, and that, you know, everything costs, when you go to the supermarket, costs you $60 to $100 to buy nothing these days, you know, like it's and then they think crypto is volatile. I'm like, your fiat's getting pillaged hard, you know. And
I think people are starting to realize that though now, because
I think
it is happening
maybe
at a really fast rate.
Post-COVID, I think as well.
Yeah, I mean, that just accelerated it, right? Like the problems were already, the writing was on the wall for many years. But I think a combination of things, including COVID, has kind of accelerated it. And now people are like, holy shit, like, even though it's been happening for decades, it's happening at a faster rate. Yeah. And now it's kind of like, you know, that was, I think, what disguised it for so long was because it took years to develop, you know, like petrol prices were 50 cents if you go back 30 years ago, but it took 30 years to get to here. But now we're seeing it move 20% in a couple of months. Like during COVID, petrol in Australia went down like 60 cents a litre. Now it's at $2. Yeah. Like, you know, that's a 3-4x nearly in a matter of a year or two. And like, we're starting to see signs of early hyperinflation in the West. And
people are, it's scaring people a bit more, which is probably good, but, you know, for lack of a better word. So
it's the Band-Aid that needs to be ripped off. But no doctor wants to rip it off yet, because they know how much pain's on the other side. But the only way to get healed is to rip it off. So who wants to make that call, right? Like, and I think, without getting into politics, I think that's one of the problems that we have here, is it's a sort of 3-4 year cycle, and no one thinks beyond that. Everyone's very self-centered, and it's all about them. So They don't want to think 10, 30, 40, 50 years from now because it's not their problem to think about.
No, which sucks. And, I guess, if you think like we do, or you've got kids and you're concerned for the future, it's scary to think that the government are only worried about keeping their seat in 4 years. Like it's the short-term thinking, across the board. Now I work full-time, in Web3, but in teaching, you just see like public schools scrounging for money, and I've got mates who are doctors, and hospitals are sort of cutting costs and stuff, wherever they can. And because it's such short-term thinking about money saving, it's like, well, it's so obvious to some people that if you spend money now and you put money into education, you put money into health, or you promote Bitcoin or cryptocurrency and things in the right way, that it will be better off for the country in X amount of years. Let's not put a time on it, 10, 20, 30, whatever you want to say, but they're just not willing to do it. No one's willing, because they just know that the overwhelming majority just aren't going to see it like that. And it's kind of, that's the whole problem, isn't it?
Yeah, we live in such a high time preference society here in the West. And I think, again, the classic saying, Bitcoin fixes this. It forces you to have a low time preference. And I think we could certainly have more of that. Like my time preference is crazy. Like I think now 10, 20, 30 years ahead, I'm like, I don't care. Kieran knows this. I don't know if you know this, Brett, but I haven't checked the price of Bitcoin since the start of the year. I'm a Bitcoiner, and I literally don't know what the price. Like, I got a general idea because of sentiment and things you see on Twitter and stuff. But
I think I've accidentally showed you a bunch of times. So
yeah, I get little peaks here and there, but like I have not actively looked myself at the price of Bitcoin, just because it doesn't matter what it does today.
It doesn't.
Tomorrow, next week, next month, not even next year. So I set myself a target of from the start of the year not to look at the price. So I'm like 300, not 300, it's like 220 days into the year or whatever it is. I'm thinking like, even when I get to the end of the year, like it's not as if I'm going to be like an addict and I got to get straight to CoinMarketCap and find what that price is. Like I'll just keep going, because
I used to have, preference. Do you remember the old Pebble watch? It was like the first smartwatch that was sort of released. It was like a Kickstarter. So like before smartwatches were a thing. So I like got the very first one. So excited. And there was like an app where you could install the Bitcoin price. I'm like, oh, this is sick.
I mean, I used to be fascinated with it, smash refreshing CoinMarketCap and like, oh, it's gone up $10, like as if it mattered. Like,
it
did. Like it was important back then.
The watch would actually buzz every time.
Was the watch just vibrating on your wrist the whole day?
It was like
it's basically a sex toy at that point. Like I want one of those block clock things. Like they're cool, but I also don't. Like, I would like to see that, but with literally the block, like the block height.
No, you can do that.
See, you can do that? I thought you could probably.
It's awesome. So you can do all sorts of crazy stuff with it. Like,
I'm not interested in the price, but the block height would be cool. Like, I've started seeing like people reference like their child's birth in like a block height. Like they'll be like, like my child was not born at a time, like UTC was born at a block height. And I thought that's fucking cool. Like really cool. They're going to be a Bitcoiner when they grow up. Maybe we should change tunes and start picking Brett's brain about what he's up to. I have very little knowledge and understanding of stacks, and I have a bit of a distaste for NFTs.
That's fine.
This could be an interesting conversation, but I
go for it and be as critical as you want if you like. I don't mind, because that's healthy.
Yeah, I just haven't worked it out. Like, I don't know if there's an aha moment that I'm missing with NFTs, but everywhere I look around, like I'm not overly impressed by it. So
certainly. Well, I think it's interesting. Kieran and I had a really good discussion about it. So I work full time for an NFT marketplace. So Gamma. So Stacks is secured by Bitcoin. So Stacks is a layer 1 chain, but it has a consensus mechanism called proof of transfer, and basically every confirmed Stacks block, the Merkle root for that Stacks block, so if you like, that's like the condensed kind of transaction hash for that block, settles on the Bitcoin blockchain. So it does so by not taking up like valuable block space that it would be if you were to write to use Bitcoin, which I don't even know if you can to create NFTs and have DeFi on directly built on Bitcoin. I think people get confused that Stacks isn't built on Bitcoin. It's secured by Bitcoin. It's built on itself. It's built on Stacks because it's a layer 1 chain. It's not a layer 2. The founder of Stacks describes it as like a layer 1.5, just so people can kind of see it's like bringing Ethereum type technology to Bitcoin. But because that transaction hash or that block is settled on the Bitcoin chain, it brings all of the decentralization and security of Bitcoin to, you know, the DeFi and NFT space. So I think like the Stacks blockchain in that case is super unique. It's bringing I think like the biggest aim, and I know that it is, and I've seen Manib Ali, who's the founder of Stacks, talk about it. He wants Stacks to be able to like write to blockchain to Bitcoin and not just read Bitcoin. So basically, you can, you know, spend native Bitcoin on the Stacks network and it work the opposite way. And yeah, so basically, like with NFTs, obviously the transaction hashes fit onto a Stacks block, and then that Stacks block is then it's almost like a double confirmation, if you like. That transaction hash of the Stacks block is then secured on the Bitcoin blockchain. So that's why they're called. People look, I don't love the terminology like Bitcoin NFTs because they're Bitcoin secured NFTs, but they're about as close. And same with DeFi, it's about as close as you can get. And I think that you see a lot of kind of like scammy pump and dump type DeFi things, particularly in and around Ethereum, and like tokens being created for the sake of tokens being created. And there's been a lot of like capitulations in this bear market. And I think, to be honest, that's been healthy. But I think if people can custodially use their Bitcoin and not wrap it, because wrapped assets are just kind of like a representation that aren't really, isn't actually Bitcoin. If you can use native Bitcoin for, like, I guess, if you compare it to the legacy system where we, rely on all these third parties to like do various trades and, use for collateral for lending and borrowing and whatnot, it's kind of like talking about, it's basically like putting banking back in the people's hands. Then Stacks brings a lot of, I think, a really interesting use case to Bitcoin. So I don't actually have I need to find the blog post, but I know that I've seen where, we obviously don't know who Satoshi, was, or they were, or he was, or she was, or the group was, but they talked about that Bitcoin being that, which it is, that sound money, that sound currency, like, digital, however you want to explain it to people. But then they said that they sort of expected, like Lightning, like I know that Lightning doesn't have a token, but, abstractions built or created to enhance Bitcoin. And so, that's something that Stacks aims to do. And I think, the fact that it doesn't interfere with Bitcoin, if you like, due to its consensus mechanism, which, I'm happy to send you information to read about on it after. That's where it gets a little bit technical. I think it's like a really interesting use case. And I think it's really interesting that someone like Checkmate and, other people, but, someone like him who would, almost consider himself a Bitcoin maxi without using the Bitcoin maxi. Like, he just call himself a Bitcoiner. Because I think maxi, you start thinking like, maximalists can almost be seen like, extremists, so to speak. And it's good to be an extremist in terms of Bitcoin, but I think, it can get a little bit dangerous in terms of like tarnishing, like, anyway, I won't go there, but, he's very interested in the use case of Stacks, and he thinks that, whatever can be built, like this podcast, how you said, it's, you can explain a bit more. I don't fully understand how it works with Lightning, but where there can be different ways that people can kind of like build or program with the security of and decentralization of Bitcoin without affecting the Bitcoin chain and taking up what is expensive block space. Stacks is a very unique chain, and because it retains its layer 1, because it is layer 1 and not like, it's not a side chain, and it's not a merge mine chain. It's got really fascinating use cases.
Well, I saw one the other night, actually, Brett, and this kind of blew my mind. So I don't know if you remember, years ago, there was through Jax, you used to be able to do, I don't know if you still can, do loans, like non-KYC loans on Ethereum, to, was it Keep Key? I think Keep Key's the hardware wallet. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, awesome. And I kind of forgot about it. I was like, yeah, great. And then all these like centralized versions of that popped up, like Celsius and BlockFi and all that.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite of that. I was like, all right, like KYC at the yin yang and like rah.
Yeah.
One of the use cases the other night, like using Stacks specifically for that, so non KYC loans without having to give up your BTC private keys. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, shit, that's
And
incredible.
I know that's what a lot of I know quite a few people. I know particularly one group who are pressing on with building that sort of stuff right now. I think they're called Bitflow. You can look them up.
Bitflow, right? Yeah.
I've been
Listen-
waiting for that because every other service forces you to hand over your keys, and
No, this way.
for
That's the
me
whole
that's
thing
a
with what Stacks-
non-negotiable.
Yeah.
I don't care. You can give me 50% APY. I'm not
it's-
giving you my keys.
No
I'm
way.
Sorry. So Celsius and BlockFi and all these.
What a
folks just
disaster!
not
And
even-
it was the writing was on the wall. It was so obvious.
Oh yeah, I mean to some,
Well,
but not to the fools that got fooled, I guess. But
I know.
I wanted to ask a question because you were talking about Thanks for explaining some of the stuff about Stacks because I'm a complete noob about it.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
And I've seen some of the criticism. I saw that thread
Yeah.
from Corey, and it kind of maybe it brought more attention to Stacks just by the fact that it was floating around Bitcoin Twitter for that week. But the question I wanted to ask, and it's probably been asked many times, and I'm hoping you've got an answer for me. But you mentioned not necessarily a comparison, but you mentioned how Lightning is layer 2 and exists to complement Bitcoin, and Stacks is kind of like that. It's not a layer 2, it's a layer 1 or 1.5.
Yeah.
But it utilizes Bitcoin in some capacity. I guess the big question that I have is like, why have a coin? What is the use of the Stacks coin? Lightning doesn't have one, but obviously it's different in some capacity. So can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I guess that's where it gets probably quite technical, but I guess it's kind of like the ability to what's the best way to put it? Let's just use NFTs as the use case at the moment. It's like the ability to kind of like exchange and trade and things in the at least in the NFT ecosystem without taking up, like I said, taking up that really valuable Bitcoin blockchain space, because you want, that's that valuable, sort of sound currency. At Bitcoin is what it is. And if it was like using Bitcoin and then not being transacted through Stacks, and then it would be like astronomical in terms of cost, and two, it would kind of like, it's not what Bitcoin was designed for. So it's almost like the way that I kind of explain it is, it's almost like taking Bitcoin, or taking the security and the decentralization of Bitcoin, and kind of almost like, it's almost like an offshoot or an arm of Bitcoin without it being Bitcoin. And so it will be really interesting to see how it works, because I know that that's something that they're aiming to do, where you can then, pay in native Bitcoin on Stacks, and then it settle on Stacks, and then still settle on Bitcoin without it taking up that valuable block space. So at the moment, I think it doesn't, basically, like, the long and short of it is, so at least in my understanding, and I'm sure there are people who can explain it better than me, because I'm not like as technical as some people who are doing the actual building, is that so it's not taking up that, basically, so it's not taking up that valuable block space, and so that the block, like I explained before, that Merkle root, which is like the condensed kind of transaction hash of that block, sits on Bitcoin, doesn't take up all the space, fits in, and Bitcoin can keep doing what it does. It doesn't like slow things down or change things. It just fits in. And so that's kind of what it does. I don't want to say this because I know it's not, but it's almost, if you like a different kind of denomination, or like a cousin of Bitcoin, that just kind of like gives Bitcoin like a different or use case, if you like. I hope that answers it.
I mean, I get you thinking, but I guess my counterpoint to that would be, I mean, Lightning could have done something similar to that, but it hasn't. So why couldn't a similar? Again, I'm not super technical, and I don't understand how the tech stack of Stacks works. But why couldn't a similar approach be taken, whereby it is like a layer 2 type thing, where it doesn't take up any block space, it just settles as it does in a channel or something like that, for instance. And then when it needs to, it settles on the Bitcoin blockchain every period when a channel closes or when activity's finished or something like that. Is like, again, maybe you're not the right person to ask this.
I don't
but
think
why-
I am. I really would love
Yeah.
to be able to answer that a little bit more succinctly, and I think it's a great question. And I would love to find out the answer. And I'm going to ask a few people who I know would be able to answer that. But yeah, it's a good question. I'm sure there is a logical answer, but I don't want to make it up because I don't, I'm not trying to.
No, that's
Well,
fair
well,
enough.
Speculating, but I dare say
Kieran might be able to answer something.
Well, one reason would be like energy transfer, like for development, right? So development's expensive, and to be able to build stuff is expensive, and to be experiment is expensive as well. So having a token that settles on BTC allows you to sort of experiment and do weird things that you couldn't do natively with Bitcoin. Now, I know Lightning Lightning's awesome. Liquid's cool. Like I've recently started playing with that as well. It's like a cousin of Lightning. But those projects are kind of like built out. It's like the opposite to the Ethereum network, right? So it's like Bitcoiners who are looking at for a solution for payment specifically, and then they're building other cool stuff on top of it.
Actually, yeah, that sparks an answer. So it basically allows for like the building of smart contracts, whereas I don't think that's not possible with Lightning, is it?
No.
Yeah, so it's the smart contract layer that can then settle on Bitcoin.
Technically, you can
Right.
do smart contracts on the BTC blockchain natively.
Yeah, but that's where it gets expensive
Crazy.
and it takes up the valuable block space and becomes
Exactly.
there's that less programmability because Bitcoin wasn't designed to be programmable in that domain. Sorry, yeah, that's perfect. You just sparked where I was like, I know the answer to this. So it basically allows like a smart contract layer to settle on Bitcoin, so you can get things like NFTs and DeFi.
Right. So I guess the cynic in me would say,
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense logically, but why not spend the time experimenting how to actually build that on Bitcoin like Lightning did, instead of, for argument's sake, finding some shitcoin to fund it? And I don't know.
No, that's fine. That's
much
an
about
interesting
stacks.
question, and I'm sure there are devs who have looked at it. And I don't want to speak for Manib Ali, who's a very, very smart man. I'm sure he probably even looked at it and potentially has seen that building a blockchain and a cryptocurrency like Stacks allows for a bit more like flexibility and cost effectiveness and whatnot. But yeah, it's a good question. Who knows? I'm sure it's been looked at, but yeah, again, that's beyond my knowledge. But I can certainly answer with confidence that Stacks allows that, the smart contracts, or they call it like programmability, or sort of like giving Bitcoin that other sort of potential that is obviously quite tricky or quite expensive to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, and now it starts to get into the same sort of criticisms. I guess is the route that I'm going down was like Ethereum, right? Like Ethereum's made this shitcoin, pre-mined a bunch of it, made a few people rich, and built this smart contract platform. And I guess no shitcoin inside.
That's good.
That was from the CoinCart guys. They sent that with like that's.
I like that. That's really cool sticker.
It's got like a little BTC thing on the corner. It's cool.
But yeah, I mean, they kind of they instead of investing time and energy and research into figuring out how to build smart contracts on Bitcoin,
yeah,
maybe it's not possible, maybe it is possible. Time will tell. But that would have been like the Bitcoin route to take. Instead, they went down the shitcoin route where they pre-mined a bunch, gave themselves heaps, made themselves rich, and the history. And so I guess that's kind of where. And again, I don't know if I necessarily subscribe to this point, but I'm just being the devil's advocate in the
totally
room.
And I think that's where having like a deep understanding and kind of like of how proof of transfer works and it basically, and again, Kieran can probably like add to it, but you basically have to spend Bitcoin, so like reuses like Bitcoin energy to help like to maintain the Stacks blockchain, and then Stacks, the miners, then pay out in Stacks to the people who's anyway, it gets pretty technical, but and again it's beyond my knowledge, but I know it's that that's probably where the answer lies.
Well, and the other aspect as well is the generation of BTC in yield. That's the part that really got me. So like looking at your Blockstack initially, and then when they launched Stacks 2.0, I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like what is this? And the thing that grabbed me was the generation of BTC in yield, a non-KYC aspect of that. So like akin to mining, I was like, oh shit, that's awesome. So I think that's another big thing that probably gets overlooked as well.
Yeah, I know Checkmate really likes that.
So
Yeah,
if
like
you
it's
if
easy.
you're a staker, you get rewarded in Bitcoin.
BTC.
Yeah.
Correct. Where does that Bitcoin come from? This
From
might be
the-
a really
From
dumb
the network.
question.
So that's the proof of transfer.
Yeah, that's from the
Other
miners.
people putting BTC energy into the network, and then from the miners, and then from that yield you get X amount based on your stacking pool in BTC, which I thought it's pretty innovative, and I thought it was pretty cool.
Sorry, I still don't understand that relationship. So I have some stacks.
Yep.
I stake it on
should-
on the stacks blockchain, and I'm rewarded in Bitcoin for doing so.
Yep.
Where exactly is that Bitcoin generated from? From the people who are also mining Bitcoin? Like I'm
Yeah.
taking from their share?
No. So not mining on the BTC blockchain, but mining stacks from what I understand anyway.
You should pull it up. You get onto there's like a good there's a really good visual for this.
Yeah, do you remember where that is?
You could just, for lack of a better word, Google it.
I did have. Yeah,
These might be really like elementary questions because I haven't done much research into stacks. So I'm just trying to understand. And I guess probably for our viewers and listeners as well is
Totally.
maybe they haven't looked into it just like I haven't. So I'm just asking the obvious questions.
Here we go.
Because like how many different consensus mechanisms have we seen over the last 5-10 years? Like
Yeah, I
proof of
know.
work, proof of stake. Like there's been so many. Okay, is this it?
Yeah, this is the one. There's actually a really good video that I'll post in the notes as well.
Can someone explain what we're looking at here?
Go for it, Brett, if you wanna jump in.
Yeah, well, we can just explain the flowchart. So the miner obviously like spends BTC, and then the more they spend, the more chance they've got of winning the block. But obviously, it's still random. And then the BTC is then transferred, so you can see like at the top, like there's people like I stack my stacks, so you basically lock up your stacks, but it's custodial, so I can just cancel and pull it out at any time. For doing that, I can get rewarded in BTC. So then that is then written, that transaction once they win the block is then written onto the stacks blockchain. They receive newly minted stacks for completing it. For I guess for that confirmation of the block that they've mined, and then that transaction hash from that block is then sent and settled on the Bitcoin blockchain. And then so you can see, well, it's got stacker 1 and stacker 2, but lots of people can stack their stacks, and there's different pools. So that's like the simplest way of looking at it. So
the miner on the left there, on the very left, that miner, is that someone that's running a Bitcoin miner, SHA-256 miner?
Yeah, well, they might be. I can't like speak for that. So they're spending their Bitcoin to run.
What do you mean by spending Bitcoin? What do you mean?
That's what I mean. They're basically they're like sending. Well, again, like, so that technical aspect, I don't understand how it goes in, but they're basically like, so their Bitcoin. So whether or not they're like a Bitcoin miner or not, I think some of them are, or I'd assume some of them are, then using that Bitcoin to like it through the like stacks consensus mechanism to win a block, and then mine that block and then win stacks. So, or to earn stacks and then pay out some of the yield to people who are stacking the stacks.
I think I'm going to have to do some more research into this because I'm not quite understanding the relationship here between how people who are staking stacks are rewarded with Bitcoin. It's not coming, from what I'm understanding, it's not coming directly from the block reward. Only people getting
the block
Bitcoin
reward goes to the miner. So
Correct.
the miner basically spends Bitcoin to then win the block or to mine that block.
Right. So the terminology of miner in this ecosystem is just someone that already owns Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apologies
apologies for my
no, that's fine
in this topic, but I just have not had the chance to research stacks. I've been seeing it pop up more and more.
Yeah.
And I've been wanting to try to understand it because of its claims to in relationship with Bitcoin, but I just have not gotten there yet. But so I appreciate all of the
no, that's fine. And so like that's my understanding, and I obviously like understand then about how like, well, at least in the space that I'm working in and with DeFi, how the transactions are settled and have the security and decentralization of Bitcoin. But in terms of like the nitty gritty kind of like ultra technicals of the mining component, I'm not going to pretend that I, have my head around each and every little detail. But I understand like what that I can explain at least what that graphic is showing. But they're good. They're good questions, Chris. And I'm not I don't want to make up the answer because it's not
that's
what
fair.
I ever do. Yeah.
There was a good video the other night that popped up that I was going to sort of break down for the Layer 2 Labs guys that I didn't get a chance to do, but they kind of go into the mining aspect. So I'll find that and share it with you, and we can maybe touch on it next.
Okay, cool. We are running quite late, but
yeah, I was
we've
going
had
to
a good
say,
chat.
I was going to say, do you want to get into Gamma just quickly?
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah,
about
look,
to
so
say as
Gamma,
well.
we're, leading NFT marketplace on Stacks. I know that Chris obviously like, Bitcoin maxis or, ultra Bitcoiners, what do you want to, what Bitcoin, some Bitcoiners are not necessarily like a huge fan of NFTs. NFTs can unlock a lot of different things. I think it's a lot more than just trading pictures of monkeys around. There's still a bit of that going on.
You'd hope so.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of different things, like with what Kieran does, sort of like access passes, memberships, sort of like entries to courses, kind of like proof of authenticity. I know that like, the bike brand Trek. Have you heard of Trek?
Of course, yeah.
So Trek have basically there's a lot of like knockoff Treks going around the world. So to prove, so like for proof of authenticity through an NFT, because people hear the word NFT and just think of Bored Ape Yacht Club and stuff like that. But and a non-fungible token, so to speak, like it can be so much more than that. It doesn't have to have like the JPEG attached to it. It can, but whatever. But like there's Trek have basically got a thing where you can scan it and you'll have an NFT and it will show you that it is a legitimate Trek bike. Or there's even some podcasters are doing it. I know probably in the ETH ecosystem, I know what you guys are doing with Lightning's probably the coolest way, but you can have have a token, and then that gives you like a membership sort of gated access to something, and that can be done through NFTs. It certainly can just be, sort of like community type access. It can be like unlocks, like you might own an NFT that you then connect up to a website and you can then access a bunch of games, or NFTs can be like what we're talking about with kids, like rather than paying the Fortnite guys to have a new skin, like you actually own your skin, and then that's an NFT and it becomes like tradable as a gaming asset. So I think like beyond the sort of like crazy prices being sort of spat out for like Bored Ape Yacht Clubs and whatever else that people see and think, oh, that's what NFTs are. I think like the sort of like more application based ones, or even like like community based ones, or like say you had like a bunch of Bitcoiners and they had a token that then allowed them like access to certain resources or access to a group via a certain platform such as Discord or whatever. I think that like a lot of that sort of stuff is super interesting and starting to happen. Like there's I know there's a group on Stacks building something for like I know you could do it with like things like Coinly and stuff, but like taxation sort of tooling, and if you have an NFT, you can then open up their platform and it will basically like do a bunch of your because I'm not anti-tax, I'm anti-unfair tax.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so like the different NFTs to basically like open up different products, and also to be honest, putting Bored Apes and monkeys and elephants and stuff aside, for art, like real art, like real, I know it's not physical art that you can hang in your room, but I think digital art is a legitimate form of art and a modern way of having art, and people have got them on the, have a background on their phone or on their their computer, or have like a digital gallery, or even have a screen up in their house that rotates through their their things. I think it's a really amazing way of unlocking and giving artists around the world a way to sort of sell their wares to a much bigger audience than than they would have been able to otherwise. So I know I like to tell this story, so I've sort of helped out this girl, and she's from like a little village in Indonesia, and she's like a really gorgeous artist. But if she didn't have, the blockchain and sort of like NFTs to be able to sell her art, who can she sell her art to? Like the tourist that comes through her, village once every so often, so I think in that regard, NFTs to kind of actually like give artists who are sort of, like there's that sort of classic stereotype of like starving artists and artists, not, getting sort of pillaged by like, so, by galleries, like they can put something in a gallery and then the gallery will take like 50% commissions and things like that, so I think it's a big unlock for like the creator economy. So a friend of mine who I've made in the space, her husband is quite famous. He's a famous musician from South Africa, and Sony have completely, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Sony have completely fucked him. Like he signed a contract when he was young. He was too young to kind of do his due diligence on it. And he makes like fuck all from like #1 hits and #1 selling albums and stuff, like even still like his royalties are completely fucked. Whereas like NFTs, if he sold his music or an artist sells their art, then every on sale or every sale that gets made, they can, it kind of, again, like, it cuts out that middleman. It cuts the Sony out of the equation. It sort of like it connects the collector, with the artist. It sort of allows so many different sorts of things, like, because then you have you've got, due to the blockchain and the nature of the blockchain, you've got, you can pull up like every wallet that owns you're an whatever, a musician or a DJ, and every and you went and whoever, and someone's paid for like in stacks for your set, and they've so they can play your music from their home, and then you've got their wallet address because due to the blockchain and public ledger, etc. If you want to, you can then like airdrop them stuff, or like there's so much more. There's so much potential in that regard. So if you take Bored Apes, they've made a lot of money, but whatever. But if you take that sort of ideology or that sort of perception of what NFTs are out of the equation, they really do unlock a lot of different things. And I've touched on quite a few of them quite quickly. But one thing that I'm very passionate about, and I'm not a gamer, so I can see the huge sort of unlock in gaming as well, and I can see the huge unlock in terms of education and memberships and proof of certification and whatnot, and proof of authenticity, like the Trek bikes and whatever. But if you just focus on creators not getting screwed, that's a very compelling use case, in my opinion.
I actually think that's probably the only one that I can partially subscribe to. The rest of them, partially, because I'm not sold on it just yet. But I can see there's some perhaps avenue to at least maybe explore with the creator economy and being a bit more peer-to-peer, as opposed to, I agree with Sony and all that sort of bullshit.
Think about tickets. So, if you go to a gig, you pay...
Well, this is where I was going to disagree with you. It's like, what's wrong with the current...
Because if you go to a gig, like you pay, let's say you pay $100 for a ticket, and you pay like $7 for using your credit card, and then Ticketmaster take, I don't know, I'd be making it up. Let's say they take like 30% of the ticket price or whatever. Like, there's so many middlemen that if the creator could just sell you the ticket themselves via an NFT,
but they could just use distributors so they can get their information more spread widely.
Yeah, but
like,
I think
the reason we use Ticket Tech is because they've created a monopoly in places to buy tickets. But there's no reason why yeah, of course. But I don't think the solution's NFTs.
Oh, it definitely could be, because you could basically like it, maybe like, well, I'm not speaking
like
for
the problem
like
is still how do I get my tickets out there? Like I'm Kings of Leon. People are going to find how to buy my tickets. But like I used to be in a band, and like how would people hear about my band? We weren't that popular.
But how were they in the first place? Like, how are people coming and seeing your gigs?
Well, through the people that help promote the show, like the venue, the local communities, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like I don't see how your example of Trek, right? Like it's kind of like a product key, right? Like you use Windows operating system, and Windows have a massive centralized database that says these are the product keys that we allow to work, right? Like, why do they need to be NFTs? Like, why would that make that system any better? And like that's why like all of your examples kind of fall into that, except perhaps like the last one that I said I could perhaps maybe.
I guess because it becomes verifiable, like it become like
yourself,
that information
you can verify
is decentralized.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps instead of having to trust Microsoft that they've got
Well,
the
that's
right
it, isn't
product key, but
It is.
I don't
It's
know.
legitimate because then, like, you know, if people spinning up, because people do, like, I guess, like, maybe at the moment, you're right. Maybe with Trek, like, I need to read up more about what they do. Like, maybe at the moment it's a little bit like, you know, a fancy way of them kind of like giving back to, you know, showing or using the technology, and maybe it'll improve going forward. But I'm assuming, or my assumption in that case is that if you're buying a fake Trek and you didn't realize, or, you know, there's like knockoffs going around the world and people don't know that they're knockoffs, it's like a way of proving that.
Like, why can't they just put a QR sticker on the Trek bike that you scan with your phone and it takes you to a website that has like some sort of data encoded that verifies off their centralized database that this is.
Oh, I think that's the problem
real
with
Trek.
QR codes though, as well, is because like it's not hard
Whatever
for someone
technology.
to spin up a website. Yeah. But I mean, it's not hard for people to like spin up a website and provide that you know, that information to somebody, because there's not enough people who are doing the due diligence. So I guess, like, if it's verifiable on the blockchain and there's like a transaction hash that you have to be able to then be able to prove, then that becomes a lot more you know, verifiable. As you said earlier, like, don't trust, verify. I think it's that verifiability. And again, I don't know enough about that Trek situation, but I think it's that verifiability that's like quite compelling, at least in my opinion. But also, in regards to the ticketing thing, like, because there's so much more than, like, say I bought an NFT as a ticket to your gig when you were back in a band, and then you know 100 people turned up, so you've got your sort of 100 true fans, you know, that sort of 1,000 true fan sort of theory and stuff, you know. Then there's so much more like connection that you could then make with those fans. You could send them a ticket to a private gig, you could, because you've got, you know, their wallet address via the blockchain.
Could you do that with an email?
Yeah, but email and stuff, you know, you're right. But I guess then there's a lot like security issues around emails, people moving on from emails. Like, you'd have to then like collection of emails, so then it's, you know, like a not as private, things like that. So it's a privacy thing as well, I guess, in that regard, because, you know, not everyone wants to like write their name or give up their details. Whereas if you're just like a wallet address, then it's you know, it's the whole Bitcoin privacy act, like, you know, because Bitcoin is obviously like very privacy focused as well. I think, you know, it facilitates that privacy angle around that as well.
Yeah, perhaps you could easily make like an email address that isn't attached to a real identity. I don't know. I'm just not seeing like this.
That's true, but if it, you know, say it's a Gmail, then that's fair, and I appreciate the cynicism, and you know, criticism and cynicism and things like that, I think, are really important. You know, for the space to grow and for me to be able to like,
I mean, it's the genuine feedback loop, right? Like, if I'm thinking this, then it's like, well, how is NFTs or something or whatever going to counteract and solve these shortcomings? In my opinion, like it's good to know. Like, and some of the things that you said, like, I remember when I first met Kieran back in sort of 2016, 17, we were hanging out at the Bitcoin. Well, then it was called the Blockchain Center in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And
Bitcoin first, then blockchain. Yeah.
Bitcoin first, then blockchain. Yes, that's right. And a lot of these ideas were being thrown around. You know, people saying, "Oh, we're going to be able to track meat from farm to plate using blockchain." And back then I was like, man, that sounds fucking cool. Like, how cool is it going to be able to throw logistics on a blockchain and do this on a blockchain? You know, in time, I obviously matured and realized that was all nonsense. And it was just ICO white papers trying to raise money to scam people. And many of those things have yet to materialize. I'm sure there are still people. I'm sure people are still trying. And you know, there's an element of, I feel like, NFTs experimenting in this area as well, with ticketing and authenticity and all that sort of stuff. And I'm not quite sold on it yet. And, you know, I could be wrong, and I likely will be wrong about many things, like all of us. But I'm a little bit more skeptical than I used to be 5 years ago, where I thought, oh my God, you know, where's the token? I want to buy beef on the blockchain. You know, like those things turned out in hindsight not to really be that useful, or like we've got centralized databases that kind of do all of that stuff already and do it cheaper. And I mean, yes,
that's true.
I guess
there's
definitely the trust element.
Yeah. And I guess there's that. And I think it's the whole thing that, and I'm not defending it because I think everyone's entitled to their point of view, obviously. I think it's that whole trust element. And it's like you said, like, it's a centralized thing. So if things, if things were decentralized and trackable, provable, more privacy focused, like there's so many, and it's like, how old's the space? Like when the Bitcoin white paper was, written in 2009, it's 2022 now. Like it's a bit of a crypto cliche, but it is still super early.
Oh, of course.
And I think like the legitimate use cases are going to stick around, and I think NFTs or not when people again they hear it, but I think that the idea, like every SAT is a non-fungible token, isn't it? But like every NFTs are going to stick around in the right way. They're going to be used in the right way, and I think like ICOs and things like that, some of them are being not used not in the right way, and there's plenty of scams and rugs and
most of them,
whatnot around. But I think that scattered in and amongst that are things like that story about that Indonesian artist, and are things like like Kieran. You told me that story about how you like when you tried to find like your university degree, and it was like a piece of paper, and you like couldn't find it. Like if we're securing our keys, and you can like log into that wallet and have that token that that representation of your university degree there. Like 100%. I think there's a lot of ways for us to like hold our information, and information should be cut. Our data and our information gets really like raped and pillaged as well. It gives us like that sort of control back as well. So I think there are a few different compelling use cases.
For sure, and that's what excited me, like building out the Score Bitcoin on the roadmap, using Stacks and the Haro wallet specifically for authentication to a learning wallet. So, like you said, like you don't want to have a big database of student email addresses that's like a honeypot for them to get access, nefarious characters to get access to.
Yeah, and they always will try.
And I love the idea of like using an NFT for a certification specifically. So it's like, you've gone through this course, you're certified, this is yours, here's a hash. That hash is linked to your like learning wallet, and it knits really closely, I think, with IPFS. So your hash of everything that you've done in your wallet is linked to an ID, but that ID piece doesn't necessarily have to have all your details attached to it. So that's what excited me, like for that piece. So like, it's important to think about. Like you look at Department of Ed, like they've got a massive database full of student names. It's like in clear text. Like
it's dangerous, isn't it?
And there's no thought behind it whatsoever. It's crazy. So I think if we can move to that. The other point I wanted to make with the NFT thing, and I think it's really key with the artwork. We did a project called Art of Proof at school. Would have been about 2016, Chris, I think, with this group called iJack, which was like augmented reality art, really cool stuff that they do. And basically, you hold your iPad up to it, and it like stuff jumps out of the wall, and the kids can sort of annotate over the top of it. But we got the idea to do. I didn't know what an NFT, like it didn't exist. I don't think, like the name didn't exist.
You could have pioneered it. 2014, I think the first NFT was minted.
Probably, I didn't even know what it was. But it was just like, we had the idea to spin up an ERC20 with just like, most people would just spin up like millions and whatever. We were like, oh, we'll spin up one and then literally put that hash like on the artwork, and then put that on a DEX. And it was really cool because like the kids kind of had ownership over the parts that they were creating, and no one bought them, but it was still cool that it was like the learning process through that. So I don't think it's all bad. I think there's a lot of cool stuff that we can do with the tech, and I think like having experiments built on top of BTC as opposed to a shitcoin like Ethereum, I think it's a positive for the most part. But
yeah, and I think it's also a way for a creator to prove that they created something as well, because they've got like, particularly, well, I hope so, at least on Stacks, they do, like they've got the contract key and they've got like the contract address, and they can show that it's theirs through linking it to their wallet. Whereas I know like if you drop on OpenSea, I think OpenSea, I don't know, I don't want to speak for OpenSea, but I think it's slightly different. So there are different things. I'm interested, Chris, so you mentioned, so you don't find the gaming, again, I'm not a gamer, but the gaming thing makes sense to me. So if you say you play Fortnite, or say whatever, like a blockchain version of Fortnite, and you own a
PUBG,
skin or whatever, I don't know, once you decide not to play that anymore, all the money that you've pumped into that game is kind of gone. Whereas if you were buying assets with, let's call it stacks. If you were buying assets with stacks and then you had a really rare sword that someone else wanted, and it creates like that like digital economy, and you decide that they can then offer something for your sword, and you might then, go, all right, well, that offer's great, I'm going to sell it. Or you decide that you don't want to play the game anymore, rather than all that money that you pumped into the game being gone, you can then sell it to the next person, because it's an NFT, so it's able to be transferred to whoever else around the world, so they can then use your in-game assets. Like I see that as quite powerful as well, because gaming is massive. Like, what did that guy win for winning the Fortnite World Cup or something, like millions of dollars? Like,
Oh yeah,
I'm not a gamer, but it's massive. Like, gaming is massive. And so,
I mean, I'm a gamer, so
so you can tell me, how do you feel?
Well, look, to be honest,
You spend a lot of money on gaming?
Not in-game purchases that
some
much.
People?
Oh,
some
yeah.
people do. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. People play FIFA and they buy packs after packs just to try to get those cards, which are, I guess,
if they were
NFT...
scarce, if there was a scarce, if there were 1,000 or 100 of something, or and so like, and they were whatever, I don't even know why they're buying them. I played FIFA years ago. I don't remember being able to buy anything. I think it was probably pre that sort of tech. Like, it would make sense that if they go, all right, well, someone offered me like 3 times what I paid for it because they really want it. That's kind of an interesting use case. But
that already exists. Like, you can do that in FIFA.
Can you trade it? Can you trade it to someone else?
There's an open market there. I mean, you're not getting dollars, like US dollars or anything. You're getting FIFA points or whatever.
But then what can you do with those?
You can buy other things. You can
but can you pull it out afterwards? You can't off ramp that.
No, it's a closed.
So that's it, isn't it? So like, if you wanted to, you could then off ramp that and have it in Dirty Fiat if you wanted. But you know what I mean? Or it can be in stacks, which can then appreciate, or you can then swap it for Bitcoin.
Yeah, perhaps that's maybe the use case, is that it can connect to the outside world as opposed to being a closed system.
That's it.
Inside that.
Sorry, that's my point. That's my point. So I didn't realize that you could trade it for FIFA points or soccer balls or whatever the currency is. But I think it's like the fact that I could then sell you my Manchester United rare gold kit or some, I'm a Tottenham fan, but whatever.
Oh, I'm an Arsenal fan. That hurts.
We've got a few points of difference, don't we?
I actually like you though, but like, since you mentioned you're a Tottenham
I like you
fan,
too. That's hilarious. That is hilarious. And
it is.
But you know what I mean? So it's like, if you've got this like one-off rare Arsenal kit, or you've got like, the Ultra Dennis Bergkamp, whatever, and then you trade it to someone else and they trade you some stacks, and then you can pull it out and get some fiat and pay your bills, or you can, swap it to Bitcoin, and hopefully we're paying with Bitcoin. Like, I think that's where the NFT or the non-fungible token, like, because again, it's not the Bored Ape Yacht Club. It's like this a way of us exchanging things without these middlemen, or without like FIFA just keeping EA Sports keeping all the money that we pump into the game.
Yeah,
the funny thing is with Steam, you used to be well, you still can like sell token or still stuff that you've earned like in games for like Steam points, but it used to be like Steam actually allowed BTC payments natively. Like,
they can all
Gabe killed it.
Stuff, didn't they?
It sucks because that was like the network to do it on.
Yeah, so I think that was kind of like the very that was like almost like a
early days,
planting the seed for this sort of thing to come in.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, we might leave it there then, guys. I think that's
been a great chat. I've enjoyed it.
Podcast. It's been super fun. Thanks for joining us, Brad. Really
pleasure.
Appreciate your time.
No, you awesome. Too, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Really
Next
good.
Time I'm down in Melbourne, maybe we can all catch up for a beer.
Yeah, we should.
Sounds good.
Where are you?
Actually, I'll be down next week. I'm in Sydney. I'm in the Blue Mountains.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
beautiful. We'll do that for sure. Awesome. All right, guys. Adios. See you next time.